Hello, everybody. Welcome to Life on Mars. And this is Àlex, CEO and co-founder of MarsBased. And in this episode, I am interviewed by my friend Josh Feldberg. This is a different kind of episode. This is a very fun one. It's a long conversation between two friends. We've also done business. We've conducted business. We've hired each other throughout the years. Most recently, we have been working for Josh at the DSCC for building some bespoke applications for this entity. And being such a good friend, he offered himself to interview me for my own podcast, which has been interesting. We've discussed everything ranging from politics to angel investments, going through, music and my views in business, bootstrapping a business, creating multiple businesses, selling. So considering selling the company, considering taking investment and whatnot. There's a lot of topics. I had a lot of fun recording this one, and I hope you also will enjoy this episode. There's another thing. We'll be pausing the podcast for a few weeks, taking a break, going on holidays here. We're also looking for a growth/content person that will help us in our marketing initiatives. Ideally, this person, he or she, will also become the co-host of this podcast. So in a sense, I will be taking this break to reflect on the future of the podcast, but also because we'll be hiring this person and I don't want him or her to begin with a very fixed schedule of already in the works podcast episodes. And I wanted them to begin with a blank slate, right? So without further ado, let's jump right off into this episode. Are you excited?
Yeah.
Are you nervous?
I'm a little bit nervous. I'm slightly starstruck. Okay, so, I guess I better introduce you. Today I'm honoured to be on the podcast. I'm the host for today, filling in for your main man, Àlex, and that is because our special guest today is indeed the man himself. So, he's not always the best about talking about himself. He talks about kind of bits and pieces of his works, but I always thought it'd be interesting to interview him because his own life's got interesting, both in and outside of work. And although, to be honest, his personal life is very intertwined in his work in a good way. So, for those of you who don't know him, he isn't just your typical business whiz. He's, of course, revolutionizing the way we in certainly Barcelona and the rest of the Iberia region, beyond Spain and Catalonia, think about startups. Beyond this, he's into heavy metal. He's got about 3 different podcasts. He plays in a punk band. Big Barcelona FC fan. I mean, I could go on and on, but he is, of course, the creator of this podcast, in case you didn't already know. But he is most known for being the co-founder of MarsBased, a high-end dev consultancy or software dev consultancy house, if you'd like to call it that, based out of Barcelona, but ultimately remote. They work in HTML, of course, and then in the likes of Ruby on Rails, which I've had the pleasure of working with Àlex on projects with, Node.js, React, and now AI and Python, which we might come on to talk about. Not finishing there, he's also been instrumental in expanding the Startup Grind events chapter in Southern Europe. And if you haven't heard about Startup Grind yet, I'm sure Àlex will tell you if he hasn't already. And he was even crowned the Barcelona chapter was crowned the best chapter of the year in 2016, which is no mean feat considering there are God knows how many chapters in the world.
700.
Yes, 700. You say, wow, that's even more impressive. Especially in Barcelona when it was in 2016 and you'd already been running it a few years, and there wasn't much of a scene here. If you compare it to pretty much anywhere else in the US, for instance. He's also an investor. He's part set up Winning Capital and ITING fund. I think that's how you say it, which invests in startups in, I think, mostly Spain, but then also in places like London and San Francisco. So, that's about it, really. I mean, I could go on and just kind of read a bio, but that would be a bit boring. So, give it up for the incredible and the not so heartless capitalist you might think he might be, the tech and metal enthusiast Àlex. So, welcome to your own show. How's that? Did I get anything right or wrong?
No, I mean, the cool thing is when I am introed at podcasts or events, I just realize how many different things I'm involved with. Not that I personally am the hardest working at any of this, but yeah, the list goes on, and it just
I did
wow,
have a huge bio written up.
Yeah,
and I did actually have to. I was sort of scanning there, I was all cutting through stuff. That's why it sort of seemed a bit choppy. We haven't done a kind of Joe Rogan pre-recorded one and then style, and then sort of gone into the interview, which is then normally typically really informal, as most podcasts are. But yeah, I mean, you could go on and on. Well, you say you don't work that hard on all these things, but you sort of do at the same time, right? I think maybe, I know you quite well. I'd say it might feel like that to you, I guess, because a lot of it is your personal and social life, and also maybe you don't work 70 hours a week on just MarsBased or just Startup Grind, but overall you're certainly working in a kind of direct or indirect way, or socializing in a kind of networking, informal way, because I think, like me, your networking is probably just a lot of your friends, if I'm not wrong. But yeah, I'd argue you do actually work a lot harder than you probably think. What would you say?
I mean, the main challenge is to work and provide meaningful work for all these projects in under 40 hours per week in a sensible and healthy way, which is the main struggle, because MarsBased is a lifestyle balance. And I think the one of the things I've done well over the years has been to kind of like merge projects into MarsBased. So I started MarsBased and Startup Grind as two separate initiatives, because I thought if I am to play the entrepreneurship lottery, I might as well buy two separate tickets. And the more tickets I have, the more chances I'll have to win. I didn't foresee certainly that both of them would work so well. But 1 year in, 1 year and a half in, I think it was one of my co-founders, Jordi, said, like, look, you're working 40 hours per week, MarsBased, maybe a little bit more, because, it's the first year of a company. It's really complicated. And then on top of that, extra hours, you're working the graveyard shift, doing Startup Grind and all of these other things. Why don't you consider it part of MarsBased and do it under the 40 hours? Because, it just makes sense. It's kind of like a symbiotic relationship in which Startup Grind profits from MarsBased and the other way around. And the same I've tried to do with everything else I've gotten involved. Maybe not initially, because they start out as separate initiatives, but once I figure out that they are good for MarsBased, kind of like the podcast or the investing thing or things like that, I try to merge them into my 40 hours work week.
So MarsBased, would you say, is kind of like the mothership, and sort of everything else you do has to fit into it, basically, to some extent?
Yeah, because as you mentioned, like, most of my work is networking as a CEO and therefore the salesperson of the company. The more hours I spend on talking to people, having breakfast with people, having coffee with people, having lunch with people, having dinner with people, and getting drunk with people, the more likely I am to sell a project, right? So everything that gives me exposure to a whole different network, it's good for MarsBased eventually. That's why part of, I didn't see this coming, right? But when I started investing as a business angel, I didn't know that I would be, every investment I do, it sort of connects me to a whole set of different influential people, which is the people on the cap table of the startup, right? So this is expanding my network with every angel investment I do, right? So the same with other stuff. I reach out to people for the podcast. They are good for MarsBased. Even this podcast that is not related to MarsBased, that is called Focaterra. We've got a podcast in Catalan where it's kind of like a talk show, John Kruger.
You share the link later.
I'm going to share the link, of course. And that one is just giving us exposure to different sets of people or different networks that I didn't have access to. And it's proving useful also to MarsBased. So all the more reason for me to kind of like make everything lumped together and work on it under the 40 hours work week.
So does that mean getting drunk, does that sort of count as your 40 hours in the week?
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is, because, at the very end of the day, in the networking part, that's where some of the deals are closed there, right? There's a famous saying that goes along the lines of the biggest contracts in Spain are signed and sealed in the palco of Bernabeu, right, of the Real Madrid football stadium. And so I always know it as the organizer of events. You know that in the backstage, that's where the real magic happens, right? So where people are kind of like more relaxed and more like open to discuss the things in a more casual way. And so, you know, I always mention it jokingly, but basically going out for beers. Some people I've gone out for beers with, they've ended up being my clients. And you know, actually befriending your clients is also a good way of selling more. So that helps. Yeah, getting drunk with people helps.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was brought up in England and spent most of my life there, so yeah, I know very well how that works. So we sort of say, we'll talk, we'll have a meeting or talk about it in the pub. Yeah, culture's changed, of course. Yeah, I was actually just in New York. I met the first person who sort of ever gave me an internship around 17 years ago in a big ad agency, and I was very lucky to get it. But he invited me out for lunch, and this was many years ago. You wouldn't be able to do this now. The lunch was standing outside a pub in the summer having 5 pints, and I was quite young at the time. I think it was about 21. We got back to the office, and it was kind of cubicles back then. And actually, for their sins, Marlboro was one of their clients. So I smoked at the time. So I got back, smoked some cigarettes on my desk as you could then, and fell asleep on my desk as an intern. And so yeah, things have changed, but I'd say definitely. Not necessarily beers, but certainly outside of work, sort of socializing in that way works. But I mean, I was going to say, because I think you're quite similar to me, I don't think you would network, you sort of say, befriend your clients. I think a lot of people say, well, how do you network? Because I would say that's one of the few things I'm good at, and you're certainly very good at it. But like me, I'd say I wouldn't really do that if I didn't like them already, right? So ultimately, they would probably be your friends in any case, even if it wasn't about business, don't you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think I am a good networker in the typical meaning, which is I am not the person who just like reaches out to people, or if I don't walk into a room and start meeting people, because I'm still at the core of it. I'm pretty introvert, even though which
is kind of ironic.
Ironic because I'm a very sociable person, but I'm a social introvert, right? So I will get along really well with people I know or I semi-know. And or if you introduce me to your friends, very likely that I will be getting along with them. But I will not walk into a room full of strangers that start shaking hands or meeting people. So that's just not going to happen. But yeah, I think I take a different approach, right? I try to leverage the connections I already have and the friends I already have in the sense that I'd rather spend time with people I know I like, people like you or people from the industry that, we spend considerable amount of time. Maybe we haven't worked together, but we've sort of soft befriended each other, and they introduced me to other like-minded people, right? And I'd rather meet these people who are introduced to me via a warm intro because it's very likely that we'll be very aligned in terms of values and the way we work, the way we think.
Cool. And have you ever sort of turned down, I guess, opportunities or networking? We sort of walked away from things because you just thought, yeah, I don't really like that person, or they're just not, I don't really have a lot to say to them. It's actually quite, it's not clicking, and I'm not going to just sort of pretend to do it for money's sake.
Yeah, you're going to like this one. So a few weeks ago, I was in Valencia. I gave a talk about angel investing. Which kind of like made the papers because it was pretty controversial on certain things.
That surprised me.
No, not at all, right? Comes with the package. I always say it comes with the package. By the way, so at the end of the event, there was the typical networking, and it was lunchtime, so beers were not involved, not yet. And so there comes I'm usually being pitched by people who have their app and they want to raise some funds. They want me to write a check and whatnot. But like, I met this guy. It just comes to me and starts saying like, I like the way you think. I'm working on this project. I've been an entrepreneur for many years. He first pitched me a project which made some sense. He was like, I need some money to buy this typical bookstore company because I am already a publisher or an editor. I don't even know the jargon of the book sector and the publishing sector. And so he says like, I can buy this this bookstore, and I can sell it in 2 years to this other company at a profit of whatever, right? At a multiple. I'm like, good, but like you don't need angel investors for that, right? That's weird. Why don't you get a loan, or you try to save some money, or talk to an industrial partner and raise some cash and just try to buy it. I didn't understand the logic of dilutive investment in this kind of opportunity. But here comes the thing. But he didn't stop there. He said like, no, but I think you're right. Let me pitch you this other project I'm working on. And then he turned like really serious. I'm like, oh God, this is going to be even worse. I could already sense it. So the guy goes like, I think I know how you think. And I totally like the way you speak, and you will understand this as a man, because I'm talking as a deeply emotional man, and I've got this project where I'm supporting men who are victims of violence, of gender violence, right, domestic violence, and I'm raising funds for this foundation. I'm like, oh God, no, I'm not sure I'm the right person to help you with this project. I'm totally not aligned with what you're saying. So I discreetly walked away from there. Like I don't get involved with this kind of projects. And then oh my God, I felt so uncomfortable with that one. It's like, dude, you're totally missing the point. But good luck with the project.
That's funny. Well, it's quite funny as well, because you're typically actually quite honest in your opinions, and some people say you have to be in a privileged position to speak your mind on things, but actually, I mean, you've certainly done it. I would say when you guys are actually quite small as a company at MarsBased, you've always sort of had quite strong opinions, and certainly around Catalan independence, when a lot of, well, let's put it bluntly, a lot of crap was thrown around, and quite kind of antagonistic language was used by quite big players, and certainly the VC and tech scene in Spain, and and it became quite toxic, certainly online. But and you guys weren't massive at the time, but you certainly spoke your mind then. I mean, how did you? What was your sort of thinking around? Okay, well, look, I'm running this sort of small business with my best friends. At the same time, these issues are important to me. How do you manage to balance that? And has it had any consequences that you even care about? And yeah, I mean, what would you say to other people who, I guess, don't run their own companies and sort of can't do that, but do want to speak their mind? I mean, do you need to get to a place where you can do that? I mean, certainly in my position, I've been in places where I can and have been able to, and certain employment I haven't been able to, or haven't felt like I could. But yeah, what was your thoughts and your thinking around when you, maybe even specifically around that? Because I think that was particularly quite personal to you as well.
There are many angles to this. One is, typically in Spain, it was very socially acceptable in the workplace to be a right-wing boss, right? Be anti-union, be anti, left-wing parties and whatnot. It was always, the boss would joke around saying, I don't even know like the equivalent in English for that, right? But they were totally dismissive of left-wing politics and unions and going to demonstrations. If you took a day off to go to demonstration, that was like, you're gonna run into trouble. You're gonna be made fun of at the company, and you will be essentially just crossed off the list of promotions. And maybe not bullied, of course not bullied, but or at least not in the places I've been working in. But you would be like, the communist in the company.
You'd have a black mark against your name.
Yeah. The second is, look, we have been pretty vocal about this, the three founders, even though one of them doesn't have social networks. But we're really aligned in the way we think, politically speaking. So it felt right to us because it was an important, more than politics. I think it's that particular thing, that particular event. It transcended politics. It just went into social and affected every aspect of our lives, right? So it was more like...
I know, just to stop you there, I mean, just because it was quite a long time ago now. I mean, I was here during that. I mean, I was sort of quite new to Barcelona and Catalonia at the time, and I found sort of what happened was quite shocking, and it's not even that personal to me. But yeah, do you want to sort of maybe recap for people what actually the specific events you're talking about? And we're not talking about your views only in that incident. I mean, you sort of speak your mind a lot, but I think that's one, that period, I guess, sticks out for me in particular in terms of, quite brave in that sense, because you spoke truth to power, as we'd say in England, to people who, they are potentially the sort of people who could be like, well, I'm going to make sure you're fucked. You're not going to get any other work. The people who could have that attitude. But yeah, if you want to sort of set the context and maybe speak about some of the conversations, or not conversations, some of the insults you got.
You mean in the workplace?
2016, was it? Yeah.
Oh, 2016. I mean, that was kind of like the pinnacle of the Catalan independence process, where some politicians and organizations organized a non-binding referendum 2017 for self-declaration of independence, for voting on independence, and which eventually was not recognized by the Spanish government. But it was not it was kind of like the referendum of Schrödinger, right? It was not recognized by Spain, but at the same time they wanted to forbid it, right? So I was like, okay, something's not right here. So those who were pro-referendum, and we were very vocal about it, we were like the traitors of Spain, and we were like, communists. We wanted to break the country, and we wanted to social divide and call for civil unrest. And, it was like, it almost looked like we were calling for a civil war or something. What we only wanted to do is like express our...
It was ironic because actually the Spanish state came in with full military police, and people they sort of look back and look at the footage. I remember it being shockingly violent, and a lot of...
It was very violent. And here's the thing, right? So it turned out to be very violent, and I mean, not surprisingly, because obviously we were alerted of that, and we knew it was going to happen, but in some way we didn't know it was going to. We didn't think the Spanish government would be so stupid as to make that happen, right? Turns out that whenever all of these repression and police brutality happened, some of us were really explicit on social media or even like on TV and stuff, or radio, and there were an interesting set of days for the business sector, because most people couldn't take a stance on that, at least publicly, because guess what? Their board members are from Spain, or they have investment by the banks, by the VCs, who are necessarily not politically aligned with that. And I'll tell you more. They're on the other side of the spectrum.
Well, I was going to say, you say they weren't allowed to speak out, but I'd say some of the ones that did were actually kind of quite in favour of the police sort of brutality, almost, from what I remember.
Exactly.
Whether you agreed with politically what was happening or not, the brutality is, of course, horrific, wherever you stand. But yeah, I mean, that's what I recall. And that's, so they were taking a position, but it was almost as though you can have a position.
The powerful took a position, right? But the minority, the ones being repressed, and the weak. I mean, weak.
Everything's relative, right? We're not
everything's relative.
In cartoon in Africa, but everything's relative.
Everything's exactly. But like those who are dependent on money and power or whatnot, they couldn't take a stance publicly, because then maybe they would be like, their funds would be withdrawn from the company, or they would be losing clients, they would be losing board members, investors, and whatnot. Those who could, we took a stance publicly, because companies like mine are financially independent. We don't have clients in Spain, and even if we had one, like, I think at the time we did have a client in Spain or two, but like we didn't give a fuck. Like we were ready to lose them. And with some of them, we had already been talking about this. Like, look, we're very upfront with what we believe, right? And if you don't want to work with us because we think this way, definitely we don't want to work with you. But look, we worked for Real Madrid for like 3, 4, 5 years, something like that. And we had these sort of conversations in the chat and everywhere. It was very healthy. It was very healthy. I'm not saying Florentino Perez would have liked that. I don't know. Like, but we didn't have any problem with them. But yeah, definitely the Spanish VCs, they were the most aggressive on taking a far right stance, because at the very end of the day, most Spanish VCs, they vote for Vox and Partido Popular, right? So which is like right wing and extreme right wing. Not surprisingly, I don't think any Spanish investor is very left wing, anyways. So of course they wanted to kind of like, show their respect for the motherland and the values and whatnot. And they turned to be pretty ignorant of what was going on. And I probably borrowed this from somebody else, but we started using a lot the term of catsplaining, like people from Madrid explaining, patronizingly explaining what's going on in Catalonia, despite never having lived there, despite never understanding.
I would say I probably manifested that myself at the time to a certain extent, because I hadn't been here that long. So I think I probably did a fair bit of it myself, looking back on it, to be honest.
But you're still a great person. No worries, no hard feelings. No, but here's the thing: like, we could do it because we're in a position of privilege, right? Financially independent clients scattered around the globe, and no investment, and that is a privilege. At the same time, we devised the company in such a way that we could have these as a lifestyle business. If we were tied to contracts or investors or banks or whatever, I don't know if we could have done that. I'd certainly have gotten into trouble because I'm pretty rebel myself, and I don't conform to the standard ways of acting in the companies. That's why I didn't last long in Deloitte and companies like that.
Well, yeah, I mean that brings me nicely on to the next question. Your own background's pretty interesting. MarsBased is been around. I mean, you're over a decade, if I'm not mistaken.
9 years now.
9 years. Okay, almost.
We started the 10th year. Yes,
a decade. Yeah, I guess I was sort of interested. Like, a lot of people who kind of run startups and they sort of so-called bootstrap, which is sort of, let's be honest, it's largely sort of family wealth, or they're lucky enough to sort of have been in a good job for a long time and started quite a lot of money. You and your friends started not very much. I mean, you say you worked for Deloitte. That sounds a lot more glamorous than it was. It sounds as though, you're Scott Galloway, who worked for Morgan Stanley for a number of years, saved up a bunch of money, then ran a startup. Actually, that's not what he did. So I wonder if you could sort of tell us a little bit about the beginnings of MarsBased, because I think from what I understand about you, it was sort of quite risky, given your more humble beginnings, more than most startup people. Likewise, your friends who started with, I guess, similar backgrounds. And the Spanish economy was certainly not in great shape then. Tech wasn't really understood, both of which are to a certain extent true today, I'd argue, but less so. But yeah, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about, you took a big risk, as did your friends. What led you to do that? And, how did you end up at Deloitte, and how did it all come together? What's the story of MarsBased, basically?
It goes back a long way, but essentially, I think we've got more or less the same profile, even though we didn't study the same degree, because Xavi and I studied together computer science, but Jordi didn't, even though he's a developer at heart.
But you're not anymore.
I'm not anymore. I'm sort of a renegade. I transitioned to the dark side of development, which is business development. So, but yeah, so we share one thing in common: is we started in corporate, right? We started in consulting, and we started doing work in agencies, and always doing like client work, and that sort of shaped us for what it would eventually become the foundations of MarsBased. Because I think that by working at these companies, we learn how to do things, but especially how not to do things. And that's one sentence I repeat a lot, so you'll have to excuse me for that. But what I mean is, we learn, like, early on, working for these companies, you are exposed to big projects, right? So I was working for banking institutions, for the Catalan government, for insurance companies, for big, like big automotive companies as well. And early on, you get a lot of experience, and more like higher, like kind of work that you're not prepared for, but you do it anyways, right? But then you're also exposed to the bad practices of the sector, which is, non-transparent pricing, high employee attrition, causing companies to hire just anything that moves, and then pushing people for the longer shifts, and the people working overnight and overtime all day long, and being extremely burnt out, and then the projects are always delayed, are always like, they're always a fucking mess. And so we said, like, if these companies, if these motherfuckers make millions and they work like shit, why don't we associate the three of us and we create something, we just work as freelancers. And Jordi had been pitching this idea for like months, if not years, because we would meet like once a month or twice a month for dinner.
Do you mean working as freelancers alongside the other job as like a transition, or just quit straight away?
No, just quit the companies.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Right? Yeah, because the three of us were pretty burned out. I was the most burned out of the three, and I was the first to kind of like take the leap of faith, and I quit my job in December 2013. And I said, like, look, if we're going to explore this option, I'm going to be the one, doing the opening the way.
Quit with nothing there. So you
Correct.
Quit with no job, no.
Correct.
Deloitte Spain doesn't pay what Deloitte in New York does, so you probably didn't have a lot of money either.
No. And I was in a kind of like a subsidiary of Deloitte because they acquired a development company, and I was part of that. I was a part of the development company, but like they created the division out of this acquisition. And so it was not Deloitte auditing, it was not Deloitte consulting, it was Deloitte development. Deloitte development had shit salaries. I had to go to the thrift shop to buy my first suits and ties, right? So I would go to Umana and because I was earning like not even like 600 euros a month, and you were supposed to dress, in formal attire.
Right.
So I had to buy.
People you don't know is the charity shop. So it's secondhand charity shop. So I take my old clothes there, for instance. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was probably buying your shit back then. But my point being is, it was, for me, it was not a big loss. I mean, after Deloitte, I went to another consultancy, which was better in some ways, but it was worse in other ways. So it didn't really it didn't move the needle of happiness for me. While Xavi and Jordi had a little bit more higher ranks in their companies, like Jordi was the CTO of a company. Granted, it was a smaller one, but he was earning a big salary. I mean, he was earning twice as much as we were doing, and I think he was already looking to like have his first child, right? So I said, like, look, I'm gonna do this. I'm single. I don't have children coming up. I don't have like the best job, and I'm already burned out. You guys can keep your jobs. You will be developing in the evenings and on spare time and weekends and whatnot, and I will be doing stuff, right? And it's funny because they said like, okay, that's cool. So here's how we will distribute the things. Like you will be doing sales while we code. And I'm like, how does that work? Because I have never done sales. And they're like,
presumably, like, if you go, I assume in Catalonia in particular, and certainly the rest of Southern Europe, like, and given it's true in the UK for sure, like a lot of people sort of start sales, they have a bit of a network already, right? So they'll sort of go, you'd go through your LinkedIn and write, who are the top 10 people, who are my low-hanging fruit? And did you have any of that even to start?
No.
So you had no kind of idea of like, okay, this is in my long shot and a short list of potential initial sales just to kick us off.
And because I have this strong sense of morality and respect for my employers, and I mean, I don't have it in certain things, but for other things I do have. And I said, I'm not going to utilize any of the contacts I've done in my previous companies just out of sheer respect, right? It's like, okay, I understand that I've earned this contact by working there, but I'm just not going to turn them against the company that, hired them. And so I said, like, I'm going to start from scratch. And, but yeah, I had been exposed to pre-sales, which is not exactly sales. So pre-sales is more like I was the technical guy who would validate the stuff that the salespeople in the company would sell, maybe take some requirements and refine that, turn that into something that was sellable, right? With some technical foundations. But I had never done outreach. I had never conducted the meetings. I didn't even know the protocol of sales meetings and whatnot. I didn't have a network. I didn't have my Rolodex was empty as fuck. So I had to start from scratch. And that's when I said to Xavi and Jordi, look, this looks like recipe for failure because I don't know. I don't have a network. We don't have exposure. We don't have experience. And how's that going to work? And we only have got like 4 months worth of money into the company because you create in Spain, so you create the equivalent of an LLC with 3,000 euros of deposit. You can use them right away to pay salaries and shit. But like the first day, maybe 1,000 are gone with notaries and lawyers and other expenses and, the brand, the trademark registration and whatnot. So we said, look, we've got 2,000 euros, out of which 400 every month are going to fly out because of the autonomous, so the contractor tax. And so we've got like 3-4 months only. If we don't sell projects by then, we close the company. So our deadline, suddenly it was very close. And so we had to hurry the fuck up from day one.
So who was your first client? How did you get them?
I moved to San Francisco for 3 months on a tourist visa because I said, like, look, if I'm going to get into startups and I'm going to create a company, I might as well just go to the cradle of entrepreneurship and soak up as much innovation, technology, VC investment as possible. And so San Francisco was the place to be, right? And while I was there, I just attended every event. Basically, I just opened Meetup, and like every day I would just go to a couple of events. Granted, I wouldn't talk to people because, I mean, I would force myself into doing that, but it was pretty terrible. I would just introduce myself publicly in the Q&A, and maybe that's helped people to come to me. And one of them, I remember I went to a Ruby on Rails event, and I introduced myself saying, like, I'm Àlex, founder of MarsBased, a Ruby on Rails company from Barcelona. And this guy in the audience spotted me, and he came to me afterwards, and no, he didn't come to me. I remember he sent me an email. He sent us an email with his CV. He wanted to work for us because he was a contractor looking for a job. And I'm like, look, man, I'm gonna be honest. We don't even have a company yet. Well, obviously, we don't have work. We're looking for clients. Let's just get coffee and talk. And you tell me things about San Francisco, and I'm gonna buy you coffee. And so we started talking, and it turns out that he wanted to stop doing freelancing. So he handed over one of his clients to us, which was Paella's restaurant in San Francisco. And it was like the smallest project we've ever done, I think. But it forced us to incorporate the company because we've been successful despite always being 100% legal. That's one of the quotes I'm taking to the grave. And so that's where it all started. You incorporate the company, you start paying the taxes and all the related services and whatnot, and the countdown is on. Right. And that project was like 700 quid, out of which we only received 200. And so it was a complete failure. And all the more reason to double down on my efforts and start looking for other clients, because we were not going to subsist only by these super small contracts. And so, I knew that we had to fundamentally change something into the company, but it was super special. Working on the first project probably was the only project where I coded stuff in the history of the company.
Well, if I'm ever in San Francisco again, I'll have to go to the restaurant.
They closed immediately. That's why they didn't pay.
Oh,
yeah. Fair. It turns out that they had like some unexpected children and whatnot, and they were like bankrupt and said like, "Fuck it, and we're moving back to Spain," and so that's why they closed the. Like they never released the website, I believe.
Oh wow! So you sort of like did definitely embody the Silicon Valley for better or worse attitude of fake it till you make it. So pitching a company doesn't really exist. I mean, in your case, it's just web development. Everyone will know about Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos with fake it till you make it. I mean, that was sort of testing on humans. That's a sort of different case where faking it can have quite dangerous consequences, but where it's negligible at best to sort of say you're bigger than you are. Do you think that's a way you sort of recommend people to position themselves, and what's the fine line between that and like deceiving people, if you like,
Yes,
I mean, you're not putting anyone else. When you were doing it, you're not putting money at risk. You're not putting anyone else at risk for doing that. But where is the line in your mind between being honest and
no? I've always been
extremely honest attitude as well. Sorry.
Yeah, I've always been extremely honest with this. I wasn't pitching anybody. I was just like introducing the company in the Q&A, saying like, Àlex, founder of MarsBased, I have a question for the speaker. That's it. No, I've never taken advantage of fake it till you make it. I do believe, however, that there is a case in which you might want to use it if you really believe that in the short term, in the shortest term, you will get to the point that you need to be. Like you are discussing something with a team member maybe, or with a client, and you're really close to signing somebody but you still don't have that person in the team. But you have not only one candidate, you've got like candidate A and then fallback plan B, C, and D, right? And so it's like, yeah, we totally have that person because you know that you're going to sign that person in 48 hours. And if it's not the first person, it's the second or the third, fourth. Like if there's 1% chances of this not working out, for me, it's okay to use the fake it till you make it. But I never use it because I don't feel comfortable in lying and, and so it's kind of like I don't know. There are probably better examples than this one, but I don't use it. Most people are using for straight up lying, and that's where all the shit happens, right? So I don't buy into it, especially in startups. And one of the things that really fucks me off all the time is when you're asking people, "How are you doing?" and "How's your company doing?" It's always great, unless you ask them, "No, but how is the company really doing?" If you're really at the second part of the question, then they're like, "Well, actually, the investment round, it's stuck somewhere. That LOI we were supposed to receive 1 month ago, we still don't have it, or the term sheet wasn't, and we got so many employees leaving, and we're still not profitable. We should have been 1 year ago, blah, blah, blah." So, it's always, the startup world is always like a little bit made up and a little bit trumped up in the sense of everybody is faking it. But I believe it's part of the game. That's why I don't buy it. That's why I don't like when people call MarsBased startup, and that's why I try to distance myself from being a startup, because we don't want to be part of that circus. At the same time, this is paradoxical because I run Startup Grind, right? But
it is a circus to an extent, the startup world. I mean, I've raised sort of capital myself for companies as well, and the reality is, as much as it's about looking at numbers, right? It's about selling a narrative and a story, and it's a performance, and it's about, if you take company, a sort of crude example, you take the valuation of, say, Tesla, for instance. If you're looking at the sort of multiples valuation on market cap, it's just ridiculous if you compare it to actually like a company like Apple, right? Or sort of even Meta, sort of taking well-known company. And why? Is because Elon Musk, for better or worse in my opinion, that's personal, he has a fan base, and he has like this narrative he sells, right? So he can sell this kind of idea, and actually it's not a hugely profitable company at all. I don't even sure if Tesla is still profitable, or is at all. But if you look at the multiples at which it trades, it's just insane, right? So even at a large scale, what you're talking about sort of happens, right? That sort of circus of startups transcends into the investment world, and then you get this kind of big corrections in the market, right? Where actually, as soon as the economy suffers globally a little bit, people look at the numbers, freak out, all the money exits, then you have huge devaluations, people are fired. Obviously, that's going to be people who are not the most senior all the time, and it kind of fucks everyone over a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it all boils down to what is the difference between scenario A, in which, as I was saying before, right, you pitch this thing to the client and you haven't signed this person, but you've got literally zero chances of that not happening. And scenario B, in which you're Elon Musk and you promise something, like you use your public accountability on social media to say, like, from next Monday, we will release this on Twitter. And literally he has got zero idea on whether this is possible or not. But people hurry the fuck up to make that possible. What is the difference if the outcome is the same, right? People don't know what's happening behind the curtains. And so that's why I think that it's socially acceptable to use the fake it till you make it in the startup scene, because no one actually knows whether this will work out in the end or not. And sometimes even the founders, they don't even know, because they're constantly hustling, grinding it out, and they will make it happen by working 15 hours every day, because at the beginning of the company, well, you got to do so. But I don't know. I think that is why it's somewhat socially acceptable in this realm.
Yeah, I mean, I'd even go further. I mean, Elon Musk, when he was, I can't remember, a couple of years ago or so, he was tweeting about Tesla was going to be, I think they said they were going to take it back into private hands, which obviously immediately shot the price of the shares up, right? And all that happened, I think he was on paper removed as CEO. There was a big fine, but it sort of all carried on as normal, right? So then, I mean, it's effectively insider trading, potentially. I mean, my point is that it sort of almost seems acceptable at a regulatory level when billions of dollars are being talked about as well, which I find slightly insane.
I don't want to have to deal with that sort of regulation. I don't want to be finding myself in this kind of controversy, and like it all depends. Like when you,
well, I mean, I think he outright lied, but I don't think he would do that. I mean, I think he outright lied to push the share price up. But my point is that it's there's lying, and then there's Elon Musk or sort of Theranos levels, right? There's a line, right?
Theranos, I still don't understand it. Elon is like, he knows people will make it happen, right? Because people are crazy. People working under his, under his companies or his companies. But I don't know. That's why I don't. It all comes down to what are the consequences if this thing doesn't happen. If you lie or what you promised, you don't deliver. Is it just a fine? Like, can you totally pay the fine and company doesn't die? That's okay. It's a matter of risk calibration. And so,
yeah, I mean,
they're probably really good at calibrating risks.
Yeah, I mean, all the big banks basically pay huge fines, but it's built into their projections, isn't it? Into the future P&L. It's sort of part of how they work. But sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was yesterday talking to to a really big institution in this country, and they said, there's a we do a lot of things that are downright illegal. And I'm like, such as what? And like, we don't keep a schedule of the employees' working hours. In Spain, for like some years, it's been mandatory, right? Everybody has to submit like the working hours for the day, and then for the week they got to be signed, and like the company has to have that on record. And that, like, we don't do that. It's too much hassle, too much management overhead. So far, we haven't been audited on that. Whenever this will come, we'll either pay the fine or we'll just talk them out of it, like talk ourselves out of it, because we're so influential. And I was like, fuck off. That's ridiculous. But the bigger the company is, the more likely they can be, exempt from doing the legal things. That's why, there are these fiscal paradises, and then Netflix doesn't pay taxes in Europe, or Amazon pays £1 of taxes every year in the UK, things like that, right? They're really stupid. I'm just making up the example.
No, yeah, I always find it really interesting, digressing here, but it's sort of all the tech companies, they sort of strive to not pay any tax, and they make out as sort of self-made billionaire CEOs. But actually, if you look at the infrastructure, or rather like how the company operates, like whether it's Tesla, Amazon, Netflix, they're ultimately all built on a government created infrastructure, which needs tax money to exist, right? So it's sort of ironic that they then kind of go the other way and they claim, I'm against big taxes and I'm not going to pay any taxes, or as little as possible. And they sort of claim it is all self-made, whereas actually you can't have big internet infrastructure in simple, as a very simple.
And people in universities.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, we all know that the internet was created out of university. The World Wide Web was created by Tim Berners-Lee. None of that was made by those other guys. They built on top of it, right? And that was funded through tax money. But talking about investment and sort of growing big, you say you don't want any of this regulation and everything. MarsBased has got quite big. Tell me in a second. I'm not going to ask for your revenue numbers, but I'm not sure how many staff you've got. I mean, if I remember, 20-something.
20.
I'm sure you've been approached about investing and having people invest in you and potentially being acquired. What's your thought around that? Would you ever accept it? Because you've got quite, if they were aligned with your values or anything, and you felt, actually, this might be a good idea because it can help us grow and kind of continue our mission, excuse the pun, mission to MarsBased. Would you rule it out forever, or what are your thoughts on that?
We'd have to consider it. I mean, throughout the years, we've had there's two things here. Investment doesn't really make sense. Why would you invest in an agency? Some people do it to make sure they can just like scale shit up and kind of like blow up and open an office in 50 countries. right? Or 50
Well, you're
seats.
basically
So
buying a team of devs in your case, right? Like you've got all the infrastructure set up. That's why it's big.
I've had people like, I remember last year, there was this Israeli investor with whom I have a great friendship with. It's like, dude, I'm ready to like make something big in Spain. Do you want to become the next big consultancy? We could totally pour a few million into the company and then just help you to scale up. We've done this in Israel. And I'm like, thank you, but I don't want to do that. Like, what's the point? Like, it's a great offering, but not for me, not for my co-founders, not for the company. So that one was turned down right away. Acquisition, that's a different conversation. We've had acquisition talks over the years, namely twice it's always our biggest client, right? The two times were our biggest clients, two separate companies that, you've been working for them for a few years, you got a big team there, and they're your biggest client. At a certain point, I don't know if it's intentional or not, they might know they are your biggest client. They're like, okay, let's talk about doing something bigger, which always comes down to, how about you join our company? Like, we buy your team and you're part of the company. You can run it independently with this and that, blah, blah, blah. So, and then you're stuck between a rock and a hard place because you don't want to say no to your client. You definitely want to entertain the conversation, but what's the protocol, right? You don't want to lose them. In both cases, we politely turned them down. Like, we followed protocol. We had advisors in this, some of our best friends in the industry. And so we had to turn them down because they were not, one of them was definitely not aligned with the way we perceive it. Was a bigger consultancy. And they like, we said, like, how's it going to be like on the first day after the acquisition? And they're like, well, so you people will have to go to the office, and then
you're like, no,
like, that's not going to happen. Well, I mean, there's always a price for everything, and give me $2 billion for MarsBased, so like I'll sell it tomorrow. But that's not going to happen. We know that's not going to happen. And so how long will we have to stay in the company? Can we still offer these services? Do we have to offer your services? Can we have these transparent salaries policy like we have in the company? Or can we do, like at the time we had unlimited time off, things like that? And we'll just say like, no, you got to change all of that. Like you will not be, they say like, look, it doesn't really make sense. Like, all of our employees will leave on the day this happens. Like, I guarantee 100% they will fuck off. The second time, it was a much bigger client, and we're still working for them. So I guess they've forgotten about it because they really need us. We're doing like a really critical part of their business, and it was not a matter of values. It was just like, it was not the right timing. We said like, look, I don't think it makes sense. It's too early. Like, we had been only working for 6 months, and they already started like, no, let's take more time to get to know each other, right? And now it's been almost 3 years, and we haven't resumed the conversation. And I'm happy it didn't happen because like, we're okay working with each other. We're probably good as friends, right? And in this sense, and I look forward to working with them for so many years, but I don't know if it would work as a subsidiary of the company, right? I don't know. It's values is one thing. The other thing is, values is very important because this is a lifestyle business. So if I'm not able to continue with my lifestyle after I sell the company, what's the fucking point? If my employees have to relocate somewhere else, what's the fucking point? If they have to be subject to really strict regulations and then work through a VPN and like have all of these like bullshit software installed on their computer, work with more corporate technologies, what's the fucking point? The second is money. And I'm going to be very honest about that. Companies like ours don't get sold for a lot of money, right? They are sold for like 1.2, 1.5x EBITDA.
Really? Is that it? 1.5 revenue?
It's stupidly low. So that's the amount of money.
So low? I mean, if you bought a company if I bought a company, say, and I'd say, okay, well, you're going to get X amount of value, X value, but there's a buyout period, which there always would be. 1x is insanely low. I'm surprised. There can be other, other factors conditioning the number, driving up the number, right? For instance, the longevity of the developers. So some companies are acquired by the team size and like the kilo of developer, right? In the US, you can sell a team of developers for like $1 million a piece, right?
if we were to sell to one US company, we wouldn't be able to do that because we're not in the US. But if we could get like 300,000 per developer, maybe that's good. Like look, I'm going to be very honest. I told these guys, we will only consider this offer if everybody can buy a house with money up front in Spain. That's at least 300,000 per person. That's very low. That's actually very low for a big corporate in the US. That's a very low number.
Yeah, I wouldn't say if I were you for that money.
No, but like that was my minimum point. That was like the minimum starting point, right? And because of course, like in such low numbers, houses discussion aside, right? These 1.2, 1.5 EBITDA or revenues, it only makes sense for the founders and not even, right? So that's why I said, like, I'm gonna put into the equation, like everybody has to make a decent amount of money, right, in the company, even though
everyone
take it the company,
kind of long-term staff as well, right?
Like all of the employees, irrespective of how long they've been into the company, right? It's like, if we ever sell the company, because we're going to be changing your lifestyle, at least we'll compensate with a fucking house, right? And so I think it's a good trade-off, like, not bad. The point being, like, if we, like, right now we have, last year we did 2 million in revenue, right? This year we're projecting close to 3 with a 30% profit. So we would be doing, that's projection, of course, we're still halfway through the year, but that would be 1 million in profit, right? 1 million profit split by 3, it's 300,000 per founder. So if I'm going to be selling for like 5 million, the company after tax, it's barely, it's barely, 3 point something million divided by 3 is 1 million, which is something that would do in 3 years, right? Only in dividends, salary aside. It's not a very good deal, losing.
Well, I mean, it's also you lose your own. I mean, you lose your own kind of working purpose, I guess, and culture. I mean, as well, right? Because you lose your own sense of agency.
But I'm not incentivized financially speaking to sell the company because it's not a very good deal. It's like, okay, I might be getting 2 years worth of dividends in 1 year only, but I'm tied to the company I'm selling to for 5 years, changing my lifestyle substantially. Maybe I'll get a bigger salary. But I don't know, like, what's the happiness? What are the conditions? What other things will I find later on down the road that I couldn't expect now, that I couldn't predict?
Yeah. No, I saw a little bit of, so I saw Peter Thiel, who I dislike immensely as a human being, but he's a very smart guy and investor. He's one of the early investors in Facebook. And so Yahoo wanted to acquire Facebook for about 120 million. They weren't really doing much at the time. So he said to Mark Zuckerberg, apparently, and Peter Thiel said this at the talk I went to. He said, they want to buy, you should accept both. He goes, why? He goes, there's 120 million, you're not in profit. He goes, yeah, what am I going to do with 120 million? All I want to do is build another social network, and I've already got one. What else am I going to do in my life?
Yeah, well, that's a good answer. Actually, look, after the first approach by these consultancy, I remember we went to the first meeting with them, and we didn't really prepare that much with Xavi and Jordi, my co-founders, right? We went for lunch, a really long lunch with Nacho, the founder of InfoJobs, who advised me on all the process. And we were there for like 2-3 hours. And it's like, you guys got to do this, don't do that, say this, don't say that. Let them share a price first, don't do it, blah, blah, blah. He shared the do's and don'ts. And so we go into the meeting we didn't have time to discuss the after the discussion with Nacho and prepare for the client, right? We were like, okay, fuck it. I'm just going to be leading the conversation and see what happens, but let's not discuss anything. So we get out of the client office, and while we were downstairs, I think we were still in the elevator, and walking out of the building, I just asked Xavi and Jordi, my co-founders, look, we're not going to sell. I think we're on the same page of that. But if we were to sell, what would we be doing in 5 years' time when the permanent supply center runs out?
That's the biggest question, right?
Wait. So they said, I think it was Jordi said, like, we'll create the same company. And then I said, what's the fucking point? Like, we have been hustling it out for 5 years. We built this. It's been hard, man. I mean, it hasn't been super hard, but it's been hard. why do you want to sell to start another company from scratch? When we like start taking small salaries again or no money at the beginning? No, man. And then convince the clients we used to have in MarsBased to move over to this other company. Look, no, this time we'll not sell the company. We totally guarantee that. What's the fucking point? So that's why we decided not to pursue that opportunity.
Yeah, that's interesting. I find it interesting coming from Geordie, because for those who don't know, would they know, you and I became, I guess, good friends. I guess through work to a large extent. We worked on projects together, but Geordie comes across as quite sort of a person who sort of wouldn't do any of the things you said today. It sort of seemed to me the person who'd go corporate, take money, and quite the opposite. I think I should interview him next time. I'm fascinated by him actually after this conversation. Yeah. Talking about
more than meets the eye. Yeah. I mean, like,
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
sometimes like doesn't follow the script.
Yeah, he's very unassuming. Oops, my light went off. So I guess like what you would do is, if you got $1 billion, you got money. I know my sense. I know what you'd do. You'd probably put even more money back into startups. You do a lot of that already, which is what I wanted to talk about. You're not a millionaire by any stretch of the imagination. You'd probably be better off if you hadn't invested what you have invested up to today in the startups, at least for now, hoping they pull off. I was wondering, how did you kind of go into the sort of investment world? Because, I remember when you started, you didn't do it with much money. I'm not going to go into your numbers now, but I know you put in what is a good amount of money for most people these days, but you started quite small when you didn't even have much yourself. And I've known you to the point I was like, yeah, I've got to wait to get paid next month because actually I put all my money in startups. And I said, have you got a pension? He said, no, I put it in startups, which I still think is probably what you'd say. So how did you get into it and putting small money in? And you're obviously not risk averse. How did you get into it? And how did you, what sort of drove you to do that? What motivated you to sort of do that? And maybe to talk about some of the failures and successes so far of some of the investments you've made.
Look, this is kind of like tattoos, right? You got me into tattoos and I was scared shitless at the beginning. I was like, oh, but this is probably, it hurts. It's like for all your life. It takes a long time. Like, I don't know, man. I'm not convinced. So like, look, just give it a try. Like, I've done it myself and it's going to be like this. You share all the information. You coach me.
I went with you.
Yeah, you went with me. And I was like, oh, it's not as bad as I thought it would be, right? So it's the same. Like, I had this friend who introduced me to the world of investing. I had been curious, but I had never had money for that. And it's not that I had money, actually, when I first invested into the company. I first put money in March 2015 into Cantox. March 2015 was exactly 1 year after we incorporated MarsBased, which means I was still not earning much more than, I think I was still earning like $1,500 a month, right? We were on a pretty basic salary for
That's pre-tax as well, by the way.
That's pre-tax as well.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I've always been very frugal, so I didn't need much money. But I remember I invested, I had 1,000 euros in the bank, and I invested this 1,000 euros, this exact amount, into Cantox, right? That's something you totally ought not to do, but I did it against all, sensibly. But like, I knew it's a very risky business, and I said, like, look, let's do it the risky way. I have nothing to lose. My next paycheck comes in a couple of weeks or in a couple of days. And I don't need this money. I will probably invest it. I will probably squander it in beer or travel or metal concerts or Pokemon. I don't know. And I had already squandered.
They sound like good alternatives, to be honest.
Exactly. I said, like, look, fuck it. I'm just going to go this way and I'm going to go hard, right? And it was only a small amount of money for an investor. It was a very big amount of money for somebody who comes from my background and who was like bootstrapping and first year of the company and who actually just invested 100% of the money he had in the bank. And then it took almost a year to invest in the second company. I was doing this through an investment platform, a pledge fund called Lanzame, and then basically just it's a lot of fees here and there, right? Fee when you enter, fee when you exit, fee for this, fee for that. And I started getting a lot of deal flow. by running the events of Start Brand, by running the consultancy, by getting well known a little bit into the industry and speaking at podcasts and events and conferences and whatnot. So I started sort of building my own deal flow that I was sharing first with other investors, and then I started piggybacking on them, right? It's like, oh, they use this company, looks interesting. I would invest myself, but I don't know. Let me know if you invest. I will chip in some money with you, right? And so that's how I started investing in the second batch of companies. And soon thereafter, I started getting the insider deal flow, which is founders inviting other founders to invest. No professional investors or the triple F round. People like Nacho, people like Pablo Villalba, so people who are well known in the company, serial founders who like, look, yeah, I want somebody who's technical, who's a founder of company, to be no questions asked, blah, blah, blah. And I started investing in this company. I did like 5 of them in like a year. But for me, the years I went the hardest in investing were 2020 and 21 because they were the, very good years for me in spite of all the global mess we had out
COVID,
there.
when everyone else is down on business, you decided to put more money in.
I was not spending money in pubs, nor concerts, nor travel. So, I had money I had to spend. And so I said, look, I'm going to be investing. That's why I also got into stocks in 2020. But anyway, so the point being, I'm right now at 30-something investments in startups as a business angel. I stopped investing last month, actually, because I'm like, now I'm going to be cashing out. Like, I have 2 exits from last year that I haven't cashed out yet. And it doesn't make sense to me to invest more money if I don't get any money back. That's one. And then second is I also didn't want to ramp up in the ticket size, so in the check size. I typically invest in the range of 5,000 per startup, which is small. It's small, but I don't come from a privileged background. My company is entirely bootstrapped, so it's not like I have all the money in the world. I don't write 25K checks. Or I could afford 10, maybe not every month, but I could do a few of them. But I don't want to do 10 unless I cash out my first exits and they're big enough so that with that exit, I can afford splitting it in a few checks of 10, right?
So you put it all in, so everything you make, you sort of put back into it, basically, into the...
Not everything, but yeah, I've invested quite a lot. Yeah, I would be pretty well off if I hadn't invested, but I wanted to invest the money the same way I invested in other things throughout the years, right? I wanted to have this diversification of I wanted to outsource my finance.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. Outsourcing finance is one way to describe startup investing.
Exactly.
So we're talking about investing. What is it that you look for in a company? You've had some exits. What for you sort of indicate potentials for success when you're... I mean, I bet you've never accepted something from a random LinkedIn invite, but when you actually have a conversation with someone and someone presents to you properly, what do you look for? What do you think are the indicators of like, yeah, this company could go somewhere?
Look, I listened to a very good explanation in a podcast. I think it was in My First Million last week, that they typically look for people who you would describe as a monster. He's a monster in pharma. He's a monster in SaaS. He's a monster. If you describe the founder as a monster, it's probably a good investment. And looking back at most of my investments, I have invested in quite a lot of monsters, right? People who are really capable of crushing this market or that market. I've invested in 3 separate companies from 3 different companies from Nacho, Hireflix, Mailtrack, and Backtrack. So, like, this guy is a fucking monster, right?
Is it, sorry to interrupt, so when you say investing in the monster, so it's almost as what you're saying is actually it's more about the person.
Yeah, exactly. More about the person than the company. Yeah, because the idea is gonna morph into something else, right? So as startups, look, out of the 30 odd investments I have, I don't think any company hasn't changed either the name or the market or the product or the technology or even the core team members, right? Or from B2B to B2C or vice versa. They all change everything, but like the founders remain, right? Or at least one of the founders remain. Like they can even put the other co-founders, right? But there's this one person, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this, but I'm also looking for non-first timers. I have only invested once or twice in first timers. I I'm not qualified to understand whether some individual will become a great entrepreneur. But I think I'd rather just invest in somebody who has already created something and learned the hard way, success and or failure. And then I look for my pitch as an investor. Usually I only invest in technological B2B companies or B2C that they don't know yet they will turn into B2B, right? Because, they're pursuing perhaps the easy, low-hanging fruit. But once this runs out, they're like, oh, but like instead of chasing, these hundreds of really small contracts, I got this contract with IBM for 40 grand a year. And then just pay salary for one person. Then maybe I invest time in just selling these bigger contracts instead. And I like these companies. I like companies who can be persuaded into becoming B2B.
Yeah, no, I'm the same actually. I must say, in sort of the investments I've made, and also in terms of my background, everybody sort of thinks consumer is exciting, but eventually it just ends up being glorified selling processed cheese to kids on Facebook or TikTok. Most of the products in consumer marketing, consumer sort of startups and marketing, the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like investing in B2C for me is like putting money down the toilet because it's like you're giving it to Google and Facebook. So what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, basically that's how they'll grow. Yeah, for sure. And so yeah, I guess just before we sort of finish up, I guess some of the more personal questions. When I put a question out on Twitter, what to ask you, I'll go through some of those that have come in. Have you, and I think you have actually publicly spoken about this, like, and even just now you spoke about burnout, but kind of what are the, I guess, mental health potential challenges you sort of faced and sort of difficulties around stress and workplace issues that you sort of had to deal with that have really taken a personal toll, and how did you recover if you did ever have to go through that period?
Burnout, I haven't experienced much, not in MarsBased. I have experienced burnout in my previous companies. In MarsBased, I have experienced imposter syndrome. It's like first-time CEO, first-time founder, first-time investor, first-time managing people, hiring, firing people. That's weird. And I'm haunted by these, by these shadows of doubt, like saying like, you're not the right person. Like somebody else could do it better, blah, blah, blah. I've been discussing this openly ever since the pandemic. And the more I discuss it openly with our team, transparently, the more I am convinced, or the more they convince me that, no, this is just fucking bullshit. Yeah, like you're the right person to lead the company. Like we all have doubts. Especially in a country that we don't know how to sell ourselves, right? We're not great at self-esteem in this country.
Well, I mean,
only another thing.
They always sort of say Carver's a more superior product than Prosecco, but it's never seen as that and sold often for less price, which is the epitome of Catalonia underselling itself as a country.
Olive oil, the Italians claim to have the best olive oil in the world, and most of their olive oil is produced in Spain. So like, there goes it. So, that's one. I mean, how you recover. I mean, I haven't done any professional therapy, which might come as surprising, because I think it's like very trendy nowadays. But I definitely rely on talking about it openly with all sorts of people, like even super experienced people, and just they normalize it. They're like, yeah, we all have that. We all suffer from that. Let's talk about it. Like, this is the way I deal with it, and it just helps. It just helps talking about it. But it takes guts to open up about it. Like in my case, like I don't fucking care. But a lot of people who could have like, maybe they're more insecure, or maybe they might lose their job if they show up this fragility. I'm not going to lose my fucking job, So I don't have anything to lose. I've got a lot to gain. It's not that I do it because I have a lot to gain, but it's like, I don't have anything to lose. And I could be an example for other people, not because of ego, but it could be helpful. So I want to be that person.
So if you think, you probably are, and sort of do inspire a lot of people. Certainly I've been inspired by a lot of your work and other things. What or who inspires you then when you're kind of looking for a little bit of guidance and who are your sort of mentors, or whether they're kind of people you know in real life or not, or people, whether it might be fictional or even other entrepreneurs or non-entrepreneur people. Like, who do you think? I don't know the answer, but I think this person might, or who drives you in terms of inspiration, or what?
I like people who stand out from their class. Like, it's obvious for me to say, like, look, we are inspired by the Full School created Basecamp because, they created also Ruby on Rails, and MarsBased is based on the principles of the books they wrote and all of that. That's the easy answer, right? There are other people out there who inspire me. But look, there's another class of people that I don't often talk about, but I like, for instance, I've always been very inspired by, people like Guardiola or Luis Enrique. Like, they're football coaches, they're ex-footballers. They are famous because they used to read books. Football players don't read fucking books, man. And so
most people don't read books.
Most people, okay, yeah, let alone football players, right? But I remember there was this story about Guardiola was being like, when he was playing for the national team, most players would laugh about him because he was reading books. It's like, oh, whatever. I'm not going to say that insult, but like, you're reading books, like, you're not a man. And like, that's really inspiring for me. Like, Luis Enrique is also well known for being like a proficient reader. And they're doing more than they are expected to be. Most professional athletes, they don't know about business. People like Ferran Martinez, he was like the most honored and awarded basketball player from Spain, who I can count as my friend, luckily now. He got himself into business. He taught himself coding in the 90s, and that's inspirational for me. People who go out of their way to do something else. And of course, all the rebels, like people who have risked their careers because they believe they could do more, like they could do it for the greater good, and they could leave people while they were climbing, right?
Well, that's a pretty awesome note to sort of wrap things up, actually. That's a lovely thing to say. I'm just going to say, are there any exciting projects or ventures you can tell us about or hint at that we can look out for in the near future?
For MarsBased, you mean things that we're working on? Or?
Personally and all MarsBased.
Yeah, well, personally, we recorded the second album with my punk rock band, so I'm going to paste it here.
Share the link.
It's still not out.
When it's ready, of course.
Next week should be out, but I have to publish because I'm, for DIY, so I have to publish it myself on Bandcamp and like DistroKid and whatnot. On the MarsBased front, we started doing Python and AI this year. We have tinkered with a few things here and there, but we'll be discussing probably starting the first big project throughout the summer with an external collaborator. That's also exciting. Somebody has built an AI startup for 10 years and will help us with that project. Really good friend of mine. So I'm really excited about that project if it comes to fruition. Startup brand, also with MarsBased, 10 years next year. So big party. If all things go well and we continue being profitable and we have a good year, we're going to be throwing a party for clients and friends of the company, people like you, people of the companies we work with.
I was about to say, I expect an invite.
You're definitely invited. And so I'm really looking forward for that. And then, I don't know, like some of my investments, hopefully another exit. There's another company is exiting right now, but like, because I haven't cashed out on the first two, like I'm not that excited about this one. It's like, I know it's going to take some time, but definitely it would help for my self-esteem as an investor to be able to collect some money back, because as you mentioned, it's quite a lot of money. And if you don't get any sort of like treats, like it's sort of like your motivation diminishes over time. So it would,
yeah, of course, it's like working out and not getting anywhere, right?
Yeah. And so if you're in Barcelona, August 31st, we're going to be throwing the Startup Brand summer party together with Fuck Up Nights. That's also exciting to share.
Where is that going to be? to let people know?
No, we don't know the venue yet. So go to startbrand.com/Barcelona, join the newsletter, and we'll let you know. But definitely rooftop. So,
Right.
it's that time of the year.
I'm going to finish now by handing the mic over to you. I'll let you close it down. It is your podcast. So who are the next exciting guests you have planned here?
Look, because we have MarsBased, the podcast is split in 2 languages, right? We got 2 separate feeds, which are actually like taking a direction of their own, each one of them. So they started off like I started 3 years ago to this date, more or less, trying to have the same topic and so we are doing 1 week Spanish, 1 week English. And then so the first one was, choosing technology. So to have one CTO for one podcast, one CTO for the other podcast, and always having the same kind of topic every week, being synchronized. But it's just so much fucking work. I don't know, like we're gonna be putting the podcast a little bit on hold for the summer for a few weeks, maybe only 4 weeks, maybe just for August, because it's hard to find speakers for August. And I'm going on holidays tomorrow, as you know. And we're also hiring, if all things go well, a content person. And I also didn't want to book too many people in advance, and this person will be in charge of running the podcast and with me as a co-host. But I didn't want to kind of like book 10 months out of the podcast or 3-4, because I want this person to kind of have like a blank canvas to create on top of that. So I don't know. We do have some people booked up. We have Frank Carreras, who used to be the marketing director for Europe for Sony. We have most likely the guys from Hireflix, a company I invested in. We have to have the 10 biggest fuck-ups of a few famous entrepreneurs in Barcelona. We want to do like a series of podcasts, like 10 fuck-ups. Just discuss 10 fuck-ups per episode. Things like that. Maybe a celebrity or two. With Ferran Martinez, we're working on getting like ex-athletes to kind of like discuss stuff with them. And I'm working on getting more like on the English speaking podcast, maybe more like celebrities and people from the music industry, because I'm personally very passionate about. And I recorded a couple of them. They were really, really fucking good. And on the Spanish one, it's more like the well-known people from the industry, because that sort of works.
So who would be your, now I definitely will stop, who would be your dream guests?
Wow. So
I'm going to predict one. I'm going to say Guardiola, but who else?
Guardiola would be phenomenal. I don't think I am at the intellectual level to follow a conversation with Pep Guardiola. But on the English one, look, I'm trying to get for like, this metal band called Trivium. Like the singer has been following me for years on Twitter. I still don't understand why. I want to get him on the podcast. So I don't know, Matt, if you're listening to this podcast. I don't think you are. But I want to get him. I want to get you on the fucking podcast, as well as the singer for Machine Head, Rob Flynn, who would be like a dream guest. And for the Spanish one, maybe somebody who's done like really big in the like one of the big names. Not that I'm personally excited about like super fucking millionaires like the Zara guy and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but some of these like unsung heroes of technology that they have created companies that they sell millions and millions, and people don't fucking know that well. Like people from, I'm just going to say trading, for instance, like, hundreds of millions in revenue selling sportswear, or PC Componentes, like e-commerce, boring shit, but healthy companies in the sense that they are not VC backed, more bootstrap, more healthy companies. Because I believe that most podcasts are dominated by the VC narrative of like big funds and raise funds, millions.
I don't think the world needs another kind of podcasts about sort of how to raise money and all the rest of it. Yeah.
No. So let's talk about more business in a healthier way, or maybe like politician or two would be actually great.
Well, I'll give Manchester City a call and see if I can get Pep Guardiola for your next podcast.
That'd be phenomenal. You're invited to
if you get that.
If you get it, like I always told you, like if you get somebody great, you've done it already with Nandini and with James. So bring people to the podcast. You can always be the co-host. So
brilliant.
We have good fun.
All right. Well, I'll leave it at that. As always, and I don't think people say enough to each other, and I've probably not said enough to you, but congratulations on all your success. I think it's admirable. And long may it continue.
Thanks, Ruff.
Nice one.